our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. Psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous.
I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that?
I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. Hey everybody, welcome. Ask Dr. Drew. I'm very excited today to welcome my dear friend Duncan Trussell. I'll get to him in just a second. I want to remind you this episode is courtesy of Needle Destruction Device. Go to Needle Destruction Destruction. You put on the text here. I think it's needledestructiondevice.com. Use the promo code DREW2020 and you get $70 at checkout. This is truly revolutionary technology. I'm so happy to be a part of that organization. So again, check it out at needledestructiondevice.com. I am going to sort of skip over, I think, the update on coronavirus today. I don't have much in the way of update. From the University of Washington. Everything is essentially the same, though I am noticing on the data from COVID tracking project that there is a slow in cases in Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee. And these are states we need to all watch very carefully because they have elected to open up. And Georgia particularly opened up at exactly the wrong moment when their graphs were increasing. So if things continue to slow down there, either they're doing something right, then there's no difference between quarantining in place and careful hand washing and masks and all that stuff, or the virus is backing off as the season develops here. Again, weird stuff going on in California. It's sort of a political nature. Maybe Duncan and I will get into that a little bit. But let me get right to the brains behind the Midnight Gospel on Netflix. I urge you to check it out now. It is the one and only Duncan Trussell. Hey, buddy.
Hi.
Hey,
how you doing?
I am
to see
good.
You.
It is good to see you too. I mean that. There's somebody on the stream here called the Trickster Coyote, and it caught my eye because a coyote just crapped in my front yard after somebody drove in and literally scared the crap out of the coyote. But
it's on Twitter.
But it's on Twitter right now. Thank you, Susan. But the Trickster Coyote also said he or she, I don't know whether he or she, watched the 8th episode with your mom and sobbed uncontrollably, which has been a common reaction to that episode. That's something?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing to me that somehow my mother ended up getting just spread around the entire planet. It's really weird. Really one of them.
Weird.
It's weird.
When did you do that podcast with her?
So it's a mix of two podcasts. One of them was probably 3 weeks before she passed away.
Oh, that's the one where she was really getting deeply emotional on life, right?
Yeah, that's right. And in the way only someone who's come to terms with the fact that they're going to die can.
And by the way, in a way, few do, I have to tell you. Because Susan, our producer and my wife, who I'm sure will like to ring in here right now, literally was, it's funny, but it's not. She was right. She was sobbing. She's right.
Uncontrollably.
And uncontrollably sobbing. And went on for a while after that. And I was deeply moved by your mom and the way you guys portrayed her. Did you feel good about it?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I mean, this is the power of animation, is that somehow it's not like they filmed her. It's somehow by drawing her and translating what she was saying into art, it brought her back to life in the most incredible way. It was one of the biggest moments of my life when I saw it for the first time, and it was just
really
so wonderful. Yeah.
And what was the guy's name? The sort of the brains behind it?
That's Pendleton Ward.
Pendleton Ward. And was Pendleton the guy with the beard that would sort of ring? You and I were doing voiceover stuff, and he'd ring in and go, "How about you try it like this?" And he'd be exactly right. He'd be like, okay. And I ran into him in the parking lot. Like you and I did a podcast later. I ran into him in the parking lot that day, and I told him how much I enjoyed just seeing him work. And what a genius I thought he was, and how he just knew the right notes all the time to strike. And he just sort of shook his shoulders like, thanks, But it really is extraordinary what that guy can do.
Yeah, I am so lucky I got to work with him and watch the way that he not just draws and the way he looks at art, but the way he's such a great director, his ability to work with people. And, artists are eccentric. I mean, that is a true stereotype. And so learning how to connect with all of them and how to, empower them. Because Pendleton is essentially worshipped because of Adventure Time, and people recognize what a genius he is. And so it'd be easy for him to create some hierarchy, like to do like what Kubrick did or whatever when he was making films, that kind of thing where like he's like the emperor of the production. But instead he created an honest, equal collaboration with everybody. And it was really cool to watch.
He reminds me of Seth MacFarlane, not in terms of style, but in terms of his ability to. Have you ever been over to Family Guy? I mean, Seth is involved with everything, and he sits in, just like Pendleton did. He sits in on all the voice work. He's there, adjusting, Stewie's shoulder if it's not in the right place, and coming up with the new story. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible, and especially when it comes to animation, it's such a. The field itself is just, it's crazy that they're, before I did this, I would watch an animated show and think, God, this sucks, or roll my eyes at it, having no idea how much work goes into every 2 seconds, how many weeks are in every frame. It's just an incredible art form. And
somebody is actually yelling on the restream, for the love of all that is holy. And I don't know what this is about, Duncan, so forgive me if I'm opening up something problematic. Ask Duncan about NASA Jim.
Oh my God. Yeah. I don't know. A lot of times people say that I had some involvement in some kind of viral YouTube video that popped up related to like the last words of a dying NASA scientist. Some people got really into it, and I guess they somehow have, decided Duncan Trussell, like I would go on YouTube and create some kind of fictional YouTube account about a dying NASA scientist revealing aliens. I'm sorry, Dr. Drew, you know me. I'm a professional. I would never do a thing like that. Block that person.
What's super ironic to me is that you're such a lover. You have an uncanny affection for conspiracy theories. So here you go. Have that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Block that person and mute them and have their account deleted.
All right, I'm going to block them. That's what you want me to do?
No, don't really block them.
All right, hold on. All right. Hold on. I'm just following directions, sir. So talk about how this happened to you, how Midnight Gospel happened. I don't even know what the story was behind it and how this came to be.
Well, I was podcasting when you still had to tell someone what a podcast was in the early days of podcasting. And this was still the early days. And I think we knew that it was that podcasting was beginning to grow into something maybe we didn't expect it to. But I was still not, I guess the way to put it, I was just looking at it as something exciting that I did. And I couldn't imagine that someone like Pendleton Ward was listening to it. But he just reached out to me via email one day and said he enjoys the podcast, and we started to become friends. And at some point after he left Adventure Time, he said that he had an idea for a way to turn my podcast into a cartoon. And my heart leapt in my chest. It seemed like it was going to be this. I mean, how cool to work with him.
Oh my God!
And so we went to coffee, and we talked for a little bit. And at the end of that, he said to me, I don't think I have time to do this. And I tried to act cool about it. I'm like, no problem, man. No. But then I heard from him a couple of years later, and he said, let's do it. And so we started developing this idea, which started off with the concept of what happens if you replace the dialogue of Indiana Jones with podcast dialogue.
What? How would that work?
Yeah. Well, that was the idea. Is like, if you take like the kind of conversations people have on a podcast, and instead of
I see. I get it. So like they're going on an adventure during the podcast, which is
exactly
which was our zombie adventure.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that was it. Is there's something funny and also something sometimes really poignant about people having podcast conversations in the midst of an apocalypse. That's what we grew the concept into.
Crazy. I could not, when you first asked me to come in and do some work, I could not figure out what you were talking about. You were like, yeah, man, my podcast, they're making a cartoon of my podcast. Don't worry about it. Just gotta show up.
That's so funny because Dr. Drew, I was Googling to see if I could find anywhere where you said fuck. Because we had curse words in the script, and I'm like, I don't know. Does he curse? Does Dr. Drew curse? And so I couldn't find. I found one thing on Corolla that was barely a curse, but then we were so thrilled when you just dove right into it and didn't censor yourself.
Oh no, I just did what you guys told me. So
yeah, but you did great. You did great, man.
It was
there.
Really
you
fun.
are.
It was really glasses man. Glasses man. It's the best. Oh my God, it's so crazy. It's so wild. But oh God. And by the way, it was a uncanny reflection of my life at the moment, frankly. Susan, you want to fill that out a little bit?
What, shooting zombie trolls?
Yeah, it's batting zombies off. That seemed to be what my life had become recently.
You needed the first lady there with the gun too.
Are you on with? Are you doing another one? Are you gonna do it again?
We don't know. I hope so, but we don't know.
If you do, please do use at least some of the Rogan podcasts that you were on last week. I was thinking while I was listening to it, I was thinking about what it would look like to visualize some of the stuff you guys were saying. I mean, certainly out of 3.5 hours, you can find something to animate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's for sure.
I mean, to be fair, an hour and 20 was talking about shitting on people and how assholes should be our new fingerprints.
Now I get it. Hold on. Susan, for the last keeps texting, talk about shit with Dr. Drew. And I didn't know why she was saying that. And I was trying to be polite. I had no idea. So it was really confusing. Now I get it. You're getting that from the Rogan podcast where he was talking about like fetishes and that turned into the idea of
and a half hour on the puppet, the Matt and Trey puppet movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It was a great podcast, by the way. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. I get so stoned on those things that sometimes I don't remember what we talked about. Like this, I'm remembering now. Oh yeah.
Do you guys get high together and do it? Is that what happens?
Yeah, we get stoned before the pot. And I always forget because Joe obviously marijuana is legal in California, but whatever marijuana Joe has is, I don't know what it is. It's so powerful and it sneaks up on you. You
know what's interesting? It's funny we were discussing this because I was thinking about Joe and cannabis and how it doesn't seem, there's some people like their brain is sort of galvanized, like pot they just get high. It has no really adverse effect on them. And you can't even tell Joe's high really when he's high. I can't tell. And other people, if they get high like that, it screws them up for a couple of days or it stops them in their place. And it's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, don't you think that has something to do with tolerance? If you are smoking marijuana for the first time and you aren't aware of the fact that marijuana has become so powerful that just barely a hit is probably going to be enough to send you close to the edge.
Yeah.
Versus if you have a tolerance, then eventually smoking marijuana, the state of being stoned just becomes normal life.
It explains some of the conspiracy stuff you were getting into, that you were high, because you got way deep into some stuff about the CIA.
Oh, shit, that's right. Because that's a game. So that's a game sometimes when I'm on his podcast, because I love Reddit Conspiracy. It's such a great website. But also, sometimes in Joe, just so everyone knows, Joe's not in the CIA. No. He's a comic. I've come up with. He's just not. But I know sometimes I try to entrap him so that you internet conspiracy theorists are like, holy shit, Joe's in the CIA. So that was all I was trying to do. And then he caught me and basically turned the tables on me. He's like, "You're in the CIA."
That's right.
So it didn't work this time. But still on Twitter, of course, I've been getting the occasional tweet from people being like, well, it's the show for the CIA. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm not smart enough to be in the fucking CIA.
You filled out an application.
Yeah, but you can fill out an application for anything. It doesn't mean you're going to get in, and we got to, I'm pretty sure that someone in the CIA posted on my message board, because it was this long message on my subreddit. It was this long message of like, and it started off with, "I'm not in the CIA." And then it was followed by the most brilliant breakdown of the different intelligence services and, what he's studying, something like isolateral warfare. And, he's like, if you or any of your fans want to really understand what is going on in the field of intelligence, ask here. It's like, that's the CIA. And they're trying to and he was really upfront. He's like, "Look, I know you and Joe are comics. Even right now, the president doesn't, no one seems to understand what we're doing. But I just want to set it straight." It was really well written, too. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I mean, but I don't know if the person's...
Well, he probably is.
Right,
I've met lots of CIA agents over the years, and they're usually super nerdy guys.
Right.
They're not the 007 by any means. They're guys you would never pick out of a crowd.
Right. Yeah, well, that's the idea, isn't it? I mean, they are. Look, let's face it. The CIA is creepy. They have a really warped history, and God only knows what they're doing these days. But it's fascinating. And if I met a CIA agent, I wouldn't run away or anything. It'd be cool to at least have lunch with them.
Here are people saying Joe Rogan Experience is a CIA program. So if I've never been on Joe's podcast, I'm such a fan of his. I'm so mortified that I've not been. I guess I'd have to get high if I went on there, right?
You don't smoke pot.
Well, if it meant, the Joe Rogan Experience, maybe that would be the environment I do it. Oof.
That would be amazing, Dr. Drew. I think that's the angle, is you go on there and you smoke weed for theoretically the first time. I don't know if you smoke pot, but
here's the problem. Not since college, and it gave me panic attacks back then, so I could just imagine what would happen now with the power of this stuff.
What were you panicking about?
Nothing. It just would open. It opened that circuit. It's known to do that. It just causes panic attacks. They're very uncomfortable. They're miserable.
But anytime I've had a panic, we talked about this on the roof of the White House. Anytime I have a panic attack on marijuana, when we were fighting zombies, don't you remember?
Yes, that's why I brought it up.
Well, whenever I get paranoid, usually the paranoia is attached to something that's a legitimate life concern that I have. It's not like I'm just having a panic attack with no thought patterns that are telling me what's wrong. Usually there's some thing that I haven't dealt with, and that's the reason the panic attack is happening.
I get that. That's not me. It literally is just lightning bolt out of the blue. It just opens that circuitry for me. Now, to be fair, I have much less anxiety generally these days, and although lately I've had a bit more, but generally less, and so maybe I wouldn't have a panic attack. I don't know. I've always been afraid to use it ever since, because I seem to have had, and I didn't like it either. That's the other thing. And you like it.
I mean, and I love it. And but when I was years ago, I went to this wonderful psychedelic conference where there's actual psychiatrists and doctors who are working in all the different fields that are opening up right now, because they've stopped the prohibition of studying not just marijuana but most psychedelics. I consider, and he was telling me that they hope that at some point they'll be able to scan your DNA and tell you statistically what psychedelics might work for you and what psychedelics might not work for you.
That makes sense to me. That makes sense to me as something that would be appropriate and might work. I like that. Was that what's that organization called? I've interviewed many people, including some of the lead physicians from that. What's it called again? It's got 3 letters. MAPS. Yeah, MAPS.
It's MAPS.
Yeah. No, it's a great organization. It's very interesting. I actually was going to do a documentary about it at one point. I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by the therapeutic use of hallucinogens. I can't recommend it yet because we just don't have enough science, but I really feel like that's going to have utility one day. I was going to
say, when we first met, I was so ready to get into a fight with you on my podcast because I thought that your stance on psychedelics was going to, or and marijuana was going to be completely different than what it actually is. And I remember sitting in your office, your desk was stacked with medical journals that were related to addiction and to marijuana. And I realized, oh, he's a scientist. He just goes off of what the current data out there seems to be indicating, and you're not anti or for it. That was a really cool moment for me. I really love that about you, is that, though I disagree with you and I think it's wonderful, and I highly recommend marijuana if it doesn't freak you out, but we need people like you who are just, looking at what the data sets that are out there, interpreting them in a rational way. Yeah. And I think that's really frustrating for some people because, most scientists, when they give an answer, it usually isn't this is right or this is wrong. It's just an interpretation of data that's logical.
Here's what we're observing. Here's what we're seeing. It may not be a complete picture of reality. It may not be accurate, but here's what we see. And that's it for me. And that's why even in the cartoon, you remember I was going over something that I feel very strongly about, which is that people try to vilify molecules, which I think is the most bizarre thing in the world. Like LSD, bad molecule. No humans should touch this. What? Yeah. That's bizarre. There's no such molecule. It doesn't exist. But there are things about what happens to humans when they take it or the relationship they develop with it that we should be clinically concerned with, but not because the molecules has a good or think about that. Putting a moral stamp on a molecule. Think how bizarre that is, Duncan. That's bizarre, right? Yeah,
it's bizarre, and it's no one's fault. I mean, this isn't a conspiracy theory. We did just go through a government-sponsored propaganda program called the War on Drugs, where people didn't have data on these substances because they stopped the studies, but they were still putting out there that all drugs were the same. This is your brain on drugs. That's what it's like. And a lot of that stuff was propaganda and completely not based on any data sets other than like watching someone shit their pants and eat it in a Woodstock video. And that's one person. You can't therefore say LSD
I missed that
evil.
One. But I would say that person's having an adverse reaction just the way I would say if somebody had a hypertensive crisis from some antidepressant medicine or something, or serotonin syndrome. There's shit that happens because we are physiological.
And that's a frustrating response because it's not sensationalist. That's the thing. Like people like me who are sitting late at night watching TV, we want to get freaked out, man. And so when a doctor comes out and just says, this is a response and we don't really, or even how about this answer? We don't know yet. There's not enough data yet. That kind of stuff. People like me, it pisses us off because it's like, I want to see the UFOs. I want the proof. I want to know what's right and wrong. So, I think that's must be one of the rough parts of your being a TV doctor, is you're always being met by some disappointment or people trying to make what you say and sensationalize it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because that sells tickets.
Yeah, Duncan, you're hitting the nail right on the head. They either project something onto me where they're reading my mind, right? They are reading my motivation, which is never accurate. They never get that right. Somehow it's inconceivable that somebody could just want to use media to try to help, try to be good, number one. And then number two, I select the things I say very, very, very carefully. And if you take a piece out of what I said, it's wrong. It can always be wrong because I always qualify and follow with things like, make sure you check this, make sure you look at that. Because I know just the way information and science is, you can never be right all the time. You just try to be as accurate as possible and always qualify it with other sources of information. What's going on over here? I feel like there's a whole...
She's going to screen calls.
Oh, okay. Susan's going to go screen some calls. If she was crawling up behind the computer here and it felt like the whole world was coming undone. So lots of really interesting people are attracted in here today by you, Duncan, and I appreciate that. I'm looking at some of the comments, and they're thoughtful and they're good. Give them a little bit on your theory on hallucinogenics and the insight that can be garnered from them and how you also have to do the hard work that follows. if that makes
Okay.
sense. Is that a viable question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, not to be a complete psychedelic nerd, but even the term hallucinogenics is a little blurry
Yes, it is.
these days.
Yes.
And so but that makes sense because, it's an evolving science when it comes to understanding psychedelic therapy and ways that you can use it to treat PTSD, end of life depression. But so I like the term empathogen a lot, which is usually used for MDMA, this is a thing that opens your heart. And
let me sort of punctuate what you're saying. So MDMA has been approved for couples therapies. Acid and mushroom psilocybin are both being used for what's called end of life dread, which I'm convinced if I were young and had some sort of end of life diagnosis, I think I would need to use something like that, and it really works.
Yeah. Well, it does. It's these substances, I'm going to give you the hippie answer. I'm sure you can give the neurological answer for what's happening. Because sometimes I fall into the trap of trying to give neurological answers when I don't understand that shit at all.
Well, you do. You have some understanding. You have some.
A little bit. I've had friends explain the synaptic cleft to me, and I think it's a cool term, but I don't really understand it. But to me, I know anecdotally that anytime that I've found myself in a place where I'm depressed, where I'm stuck, and certainly a lot of that is for me has been linked to trauma on stuff I haven't dealt with, that psychedelics have either brought that trauma to the forefront and challenged me to deal with it. And if I deal with it, then there's some remission of the anxiety and depression that was related to that. But if you don't deal with it, you have a bad trip. So I think a lot of times when people are taking a psychedelic, suddenly they don't realize that what they're dealing with is trauma. They're dealing with some,
Well, I've talked to some of these people that call themselves shamans that give people these trips with the plants, plant-based stuff, and they believe the plants, I forget the language they use, but it's a language I'm not familiar with. And it's essentially saying that the plants bring the trauma forth to be looked at in a different way. Does that make sense? That you can get at it differently.
Yeah. That's another thing I've learned about over the course of my podcast is that there's people who call themselves shamans. That's an easy thing to do. As far as I'm aware, there's no board of certification for shamans.
No.
But then there's actually shamans, which is, a tradition of medicine in South America, all over the planet, in many indigenous cultures. It's very similar to the role of a midwife. And it's not just related to psychedelics, it's related to all plant medicines. And I think depending on the particular lineage of shamanism, there's various explanations for why the healing happens. And some of it reminds me a little bit of what's it called? When you get the acupuncture, it's a different energetic model than the current one that you use, and I think it's kind of based on this idea that darkness ends up getting stuck in you. Like we're a sponge for everything. And if we soak up really dark shit, it sticks with us in some physical way, and the plant medicine pushes it out of you. It somehow, and that's just their model. I mean, whether that's true or not.
No, you're right, but that's the kind of language they use, right? It's not a language that I can make sense of, but that is the way they describe these things, those sorts of things, and the other thing is, in addition to trauma, the other thing is, and this is the more the end of life stuff, is it connects you to, it gives you it shuts down your sense of self and connects to you something bigger than yourself. Would that be an accurate way to say that? Yeah.
That's an accurate way to say it. And that connection is, I think, innately healing. So whether it's trauma, whether it's addiction, they've used psilocybin for the treatment of cigarette addiction, nicotine addiction. And there seems to be one of the ways you can tell whether or not the therapy is going to be effective is if the person has a mystical experience. And it's amazing to see the mystical experience being broken down into the language of science, because they have to do that. Because, it's people keep returning this report of contacting God. And if you look at these studies, it's so funny to see the scientific, like, here are 10 aspects of the mystical experience on mushrooms. It seems really dry, but it's a translation from, the language of poetry and religion into the language of quantification that science requires, so people can understand. But in general, they just say, if you end up talking to God on mushrooms, the odds are you're going to quit smoking, which is pretty cool.
I want to look into this. I'm thinking about doing some sort of documentary or something where we do scans and see what's actually changing in people's brains and see whether it persists, that kind of thing. There's a lot of people doing this out there. I know that. And so I feel like we kind of have to figure out what's going on because people are doing it. You know what I mean? Also, somebody brought up the issue of ketamine. Now, who would have thought that ketamine is now a significant treatment for depression?
No one. I mean, this is what's so exciting about this particular field is we're discovering all of these that these chemicals have so many uses. Particularly ketamine, it's so magical in the sense that it's not just used for treating depression. It's been used as an anesthetic for how long? How long has it been used for putting people under? It's like a long time. All over the planet.
Yeah, it's used primarily in adolescents because they tend to, for whatever it is about the adolescent brain, it responds better to this stuff as an anesthetic. It's called a dissociative anesthetic. It puts you sort of out of body and disconnects you from everything. Sometimes adults find that unpleasant. In the doses they use for the depression, there's different things. There's a nasal spray and there's also an infusion that you can get. People do not report I've not seen any reports of adverse experiences from that. And damn, sometimes it really works for depression.
Worked for me.
Oh, you had formally treated, or you just did it on your own?
Yeah, formally treated.
Wow.
With a dose of intramuscular ketamine, and just I think that my experience is not what the research is showing. Generally, people need like five of these sessions mixed in with therapy, but for me, one seemed to do the trick. And I'm not saying this isn't a miracle cure or anything like that, but having suffered from depression my whole damn life, whenever I would get depressed the way I get a cold, where it's like, shit, here we go. The difference being with a cold, you're like, this is going to be a month. With depression, you're like, I don't know how, this could be a year, this could be 2 years, unless I go, get antidepressants, which I don't like because I can't come on them, at least the ones that I've tried. And so this ketamine, it was the damnedest thing to suddenly, in the afternoon after the treatment, to begin to experience a remission of the symptoms of my depression, which are usually just absolute numbness, tiredness, not wanting to do anything, just a low level despair. And it didn't fix it. I don't want to say that it fixed it. That would be ridiculous, but it did. I don't know. It did something that no antidote. Yeah, that's the word for it. Got me over the hump.
How long did it last?
Because I haven't gotten depressed since then. I'm not to say that I don't get like completely stressed out and blue or weird or whatever, but I have not experienced any depression after that. So I don't know, man. If it's placebo, I'll take the placebo. Fuck depression, it's the worst.
It is the worst. No, it exceeds placebo efficacy. So believe me, it's not typically placebo. That's for sure. Let's talk about other fun things, if you don't mind.
Don't mind.
Your son is doing well?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Today, he started, man, he's really talking. Every day it's new words. But today I taught him how to say, hi-ya! So he's been saying that, and it's the greatest thing to hear. He loves it. He recognizes the power of that sound.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let me get a call in here, Duncan. Here we go. I got more. Well, let me ask before I get the calls. Have you done any drunk histories lately?
Well, yes, I did. I don't know how much I can talk about it, but I know that the production got halted because of COVID. So they were shooting it. I was going to go watch them on the day of the shoot, and I couldn't because it happened simultaneous to the pandemic. Yeah.
How come he didn't let me drink with you? I'm so pissed off about that.
I know. You know what? I can't give it away. There's actually a reason that it doesn't involve a rejection of you, because I know Derek loves you and I love you. And like just getting drunk with Dr. Drew, it was really a highlight of my life.
It was to get drunk with Duncan was a highlight of mine, and talk about dolphins, and then having Shiri Appleby play the scientist was especially ironic. I thought
She's so good.
I'm a huge fan of Unreal. And if people don't know it, I believe that it was Duncan Trussell's original Drunk History about Tesla that made Drunk History a series. I really believe that. It's online. You can find it. Just look up Duncan Trussell, Drunk History Tesla, and you will see the best drunk history ever done. But it almost destroyed you. It almost killed you, but it really was a great drunk history. That one seems intense.
After that one, they had to do a nurse, like, because I got so drunk, because we didn't know absinthe had the alcohol content it had. So, and I was trying to look cool. So that's a recipe for death.
That was not good. That was not good. And what else have we done together? We've done the cartoon. We've done the drunk histories. Did we do anything else? Are we doing other television together?
Well, our podcast, but other than that, no television. I'm so happy we became friends, though. You're like one of my favorite Hollywood friends. When I was younger, I never expected I'd be friends with you, but you know, I don't want to be cheesy or whatever, but I hope people give you a goddamn break. No offense for those Christians in the listening crowd, but you're a sweet human being, and
well, thanks.
You know, I know there's not in a million years you would ever want to hurt anybody, and so I'm sorry that you're in the midst of some maelstrom right now, because being your friend, having been to your house, you're such a before Midnight Gospel, you're so generous, and you I don't know, I hope people give you a break, because you didn't mean to, you weren't trying to hurt anybody, you just wanted to help.
No, I was worried about exactly what's happening. I was worried that we'd end up with numbers like the flu, which is what has happened, and that we would create a huge panic and cause untold damage other ways, which it looks like we're happening. And we got weird shit going on in California, where the governor is in some sort of power struggle with local authorities and whether a beach should be open. It's really bizarre, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, and also, might I just add, remember you told me that it was okay to do shows. You were wrong, but I'll tell you what, that's okay, because you're allowed to be wrong. You know what I mean? You weren't saying that. It's not like you flipped a coin and you were like, yeah, Duncan, you can go do shows. I know you, and I know that you were looking at all the data out there, and we were all looking at data at the time, and it seemed like you could.
Let me tell you what I based that on. I talked yesterday to the clinical director of the Department of Health for LA County. And I said to her, throughout human history, throughout medical history, quarantine was something you did to people who were sick. You quarantined sick people. Yeah. Never before had a population been quarantined or asked to shelter in place. Do you know where that idea came from?
No.
Any idea? A 14-year-old high school student in New Mexico in 2006 did a science project where she concluded that shutting down schools would help reduce transmission of pandemics. Her father then built a computer program that helped reinforce that. This is an entirely new idea. And the clinical director admitted to me that we don't know that there's a difference between hand washing and masks and social distancing and quarantining. We don't know there is a difference between those two to this date. So when I told you it was okay to do shows, I was talking about, but maintain social distance and wear your mask and all that good stuff. But literally at this moment, we don't know that quarantine is actually more effective than that. Isn't that crazy?
There you go. That's why people get mad at you, because you're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed. No, but you can't. You're not, because the idea, here's the reason. Number one, there's so many parallel ideas that are happening at the same time. We don't every single day I pendulum from thinking to myself, well, I hope they do martial law. I'm terrified. I don't want to have a stroke. I don't want to. I don't know what this is. I don't to like some kind of insanity where I'm like, I'm just gonna run naked outside. I don't care. And, because it just depends on what you're watching. And I think people are feeling a justified frustration. And the last thing you want to feel when there's a pandemic is frustrated confusion, which I think is what if you're not experiencing that, then you're probably a reptile. You're probably in the Illuminati.
And that's why, here's what I'd recommend to you and to everybody is rather than run naked down the street, just listen to the CDC. That's who you listen to. They're the most reasoned body out there. They're going to be a little conservative, but that's their job. They should be that, and they get us through this. They never recommended a quarantine. They never did.
Really?
That was the governors decided to do that. And my feeling on that is fine. It will work. Good. I'll sign up for it on behalf of being a good citizen, on behalf of one another. We should do it. And it did work. Right. It really worked in California. But it was not the CDC's explicit recommendation. At least I never saw them make that recommendation. Maybe somebody can fact check me on that. I could be off. But even now, when you go to the website, they're not recommending quarantine. They're recommending hand washing, masks, safe distance. That's what they're recommending. So when the governor freaks out about beaches, guess what? There's almost zero out of 350 cases in China. There's one case of it being transmitted out of doors. And there's good evidence now that it dies in sunlight. So the best place you could be is outside in the sunlight, wearing a mask 6 feet away from somebody. Indoors, wearing a mask 6 feet away, worst place you can be. So to sort of come down on beaches, that is not science. That is not science. Again, that's another thing that's going to piss people off.
I wish they made us wear masks over our stomachs too, because I feel fat at the beach. That'd be so cool to finally be able to wear a onesie and be like, I'm being safe.
Dustin, I did not say it was not transmissible human to human. I said there have been one case out of 350 documented in China of out-of-door transmission. One case. And the CDC director here last Thursday, one day ago, said he had zero evidence of out-of-door transmission. That was his quote. So again, fact check me and all that. You're happy to do it. And Tony says, I have a buddy at the CDC and that they're very conservative with this. Yes, they are very conservative. That's their job, to get us through this safely. Look, I was alongside Anthony Fauci during the AIDS epidemic, and we were all we were chanting that there were going to be 10 million dead people unless people changed their behavior. Ended up being more like 175,000. We were off by a factor of 100. And we congratulated ourselves for that. Because do you know the reason I got on the radio was Fauci? Do you know that?
No, I had no idea.
It was early 1980s. I was deep working in the AIDS epidemic, and it was the most horrific experience you could ever imagine. Everybody was dying, and Fauci was saying, "We got to get on the radio. Or you got to get out there and teach. You got to get out there and tell everybody to change their behavior." And so I took that very seriously. And when I had a chance to go on the radio, that's what I talked about. This thing that we had just stopped calling grids, and now we're starting to call AIDS. Wow. We had HTLV3, if you remember that. We had barely causative agents and stuff like that. Very interesting. Well, let's go to some calls here, my friend. Here we go. We're going to talk a little psychedelics from Dean. Dean, what's going on, buddy? Hi, Dean.
Hey, man. How are you guys?
It's going great. How are you?
So I'm just calling in from Massachusetts. I'm an art student. And I love everything that you guys did in that show, first of all. Fucking amazing.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to curse.
No, go ahead.
You can curse.
It was fucking amazing. It really was truly amazing. When I saw it, I was... All right. Duncan, I'm having a hard time not calling you Clancy now. That's how sort of... I'm not kidding. I was taken away by it.
You can call me Clancy.
Hey, you don't know how much I appreciate that, though. The development of that character in the show entirely, holy crap. And I've listened to what you said on Rogan and shit, and I just want to say that you are so right about how it is to make a video game. I've been involved with making video games in the past at my school over the past 3 years, and it goes hard the whole time.
I bet.
But you know what? Yeah. But going into the question I was going to ask, I want to know, do you think psychedelics help people regain compassion? Or maybe some kind of understanding that the status quo may block people from being able to see?
Dean, that's a profound question. I'm going to put you back in the queue. You can listen to the answer. I know Duncan has a lot of strong feelings about this. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think in Buddhism there's a concept called fundamental goodness, and it's essentially the idea that humans are good. That you every single person. I get it's such a dumb way to describe it, but we're all. Oh man, this is such a dumb way to describe it. I'm sorry to all Buddhists. It's like we're all iPhones that have too many apps running in the foreground, and a lot of those apps are the different experiences we've had throughout our lives, the expectations we have for the way things are going to be, and all the judgments we have that are not really necessarily based on the way things are, but the way they used to be when we were more impressionable than we are now. And so we end up getting covered with all this static, but underneath it is a kind of primordial state, which as one of its qualities is just instantaneously compassionate. So I think that psychedelics have the potential to turn all your apps off for a moment so that you experience sort of what you are as you are before even language. And that I think that state is generally a compassionate state.
And do a little primer on your elevator analogy and other forms of enlightenment.
Oh, right. Well, this is if you go back and read Ram Dass writing about what it was like when he was at Harvard and when they were experimenting with LSD, they were getting really frustrated because they were having these profound experiences, but they weren't able to stay in that space. They kept coming down. That was the problem. That's how much they loved LSD. A lot of people think Ram Dass went to India because he thought drugs were bad or he was finding a new path or something like that. And it was because he was tired of coming down. And he was tired of having these incredible mystical experiences, but then in a few days suddenly being solidified back in his identity. And so the analogy he uses is an elevator, that psychedelics can be like an elevator that takes you into this incredible party. The doors open, there's this beautiful landscape, but then it takes you back down and you're back to who you were. And so the question is, do we even need these substances to achieve that state? And I think, Ram Dass and much of what he teaches is like actually the psychedelics are pale in comparison to what's possible through other, practices.
Somebody's asking, do I think compassion is something more than the functioning of our mirror neuron system? So Mark is asking, does compassion exist outside of brain? I'm a physicalist, naturalist, and I do believe that it's all a human experience, but that I believe there's a value in it above its biological basis. And I believe that value may be something interesting and transcendent, and it's interesting to think about it, right? There's ways to think about the nature of the thought, the epistemology, and the oncology, the oncological aspects of it. What is its existence? And
Dr. Drew, one of the things you talk about in Midnight Gospel, which I love, and we've talked about it privately, is the connection between people. That. And I think compassion, maybe it lives in that connection. And that connection naturally is outside of you in the sense that you're connected to another person. So you could say, yes, compassion is in the connections.
I think most important human experiences, including consciousness, I don't want to get too deep into this. You and I have had other podcasts about that. Maybe it'll be a future Midnight Gospel. But I think it all happens between and amongst people. Important things, meaning of life, your very self-function, compassion, love, all these things is about humans in social connectedness with other people. And the deeper we are open and available for that, the more meaningful it is, and the more nourishing it can be. Is that about a good way to describe it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it. And I think psychedelics have the ability to illuminate that connection. It's always there, but something about the psychedelic can show it to you in this way that you forgot. And it's easy to forget.
Well, and psychedelics does a little different piece too. It's also there is a transcendent something that we're all part of too, that I don't know is or is not social, or I don't know, but that's a part that's harder to get into your day in out life. Amanda, you have a question. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Hi. Dr. Drew, love you so much.
Thanks,
since
Amanda.
the late 90s. Been a fan for years. Just wanted to say your wife was super nice on the phone. She's awesome.
She is
yay.
awesome.
And, but
Thank you.
yeah, so my question, and then, wanted to, I want to thank Duncan for his openness and everything going on. But, I'm a long-winded person. I'll just get to the point of my question, sort of. I guess I was just going to ask was that, basically I've dealt with like depression, like over the years, and, struggle with minor depression, anxiety, and panic attacks ever since, like, I've just had a lot of tragedy over most of my life. So I just want to ask Duncan and you too, Dr. Drew, like advice, like how is it that comedians, especially listening to your mom's house, I listen to that, love all that too, how comedy, how I deal with where I get sad instead of laughing things off. And I'm just wondering, like, what could help? Because sometimes I get stuck in triggers where I get real, like, sad and panic attacky and anxiety
how old are you,
and everything going on.
Amanda, how old are you?
I'm 41.
Are you on any medication?
Just turned 41.
Any medication?
No.
Okay. All right.
We'll
we'll struggle with
my
this.
mom when I was 7, and my dad died of cancer when I was like 20.
Okay, we'll struggle with this because it's an interesting question. A lot of the your mom's house stuff I was doing initially with After Dark was examining comedians and they always had trauma, like they always have trauma in the background, and how comedy solved that. They usually, most of them had a moment where they got hooked. Like I was 19, I went on an open mic, and that laughter, pulled me into some transcendent experience that I had to have more of.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of comics, for them, that's one of the only times they don't feel crazy is when they're in front of a group of strangers, which is implicitly insane, right? That's crazy. But I know that was,
let's get me crazier. Hold on. It's a group of strangers who are signaling aggression, which is what primates do. They smile when they're feeling aggressive, and then they have a collective discharge of mirth, which we have no idea what that really is. and that's when comedians feel alive.
Yeah, it's true. But then a lot of them don't have that kind of, I guess you could say stereotypical schmaltzy sort of like mystification of it. They just love doing it, and they love the evolution of it. Comedians are all different, and for sure, most of them that I've run into do have some kind of brutal thing in their past that is shaping a lot of their life philosophy and stuff. And I think the alchemy of it is so incredible in the sense that they're alchemizing their trauma into something that is making people feel laughter. But damn, I don't know if that solves the problem for them. I think it's a temporary fix, which is why, sadly, we lose comedians a lot. It's a job where I've lost, I've lost 2 friends who have been comedians, one to a drug overdose and one to suicide. And they were brilliant and they were funny. So I don't know that getting on stage was necessarily the balm that was, healing them. But it does create a temporary distraction from pain when you're on stage. That's for sure.
Brody, you're talking about?
Yeah, Brody.
It's terrible.
And he was brilliant. He was so funny, funny. He's got some of my favorite jokes of all time. But, I think that when your question, there's like inside the question is a really great question, which is, how do I fix this? Like, how do I fix the suffering? How do I fix my pain? Is there a way to just fix this? And I think the problem is there isn't one way. It can't just be one thing. I think it's a lot of different different methods depending. And the first one for me has always been letting people in my circle know that I'm not feeling good. Telling my wife that I feel like shit. Because when this pandemic started, I was trying to make her think I was fine. And I was secretly freaking out, man. And then finally one morning I told her, every morning I'm waking up and I feel like I'm getting run over by society. It's such a claustrophobic feeling. And she's like, you're feeling bad? Like the whole time she's been telling me how rotten she feels. And instead of being like, I feel like terrible too, I was like installing lamps, trying to seem, like doing household projects. I'm fine, honey. I was suddenly like Ward Cleaver, or whoever the dad was, like I'm never like that. I don't install lamps. But I was isolating her, and also I wasn't opening myself up for her to comfort me. So I think that, the very first step is like doing what you just did, calling Dr. Drew, asking for help, and then listening to the response that you get, not from just the doctor here, but from your family and friends, and then following through with that.
Other people.
Yeah.
So sunshine, exercise, maybe some purpose, which is hard right now, and then connecting with other people and finding somebody who actually cares and is willing to listen to you, and then you unload on them. I'm glad your wife is keeping you in line from the standpoint of your conspiracy theories. I heard you say that on Rogan. I thought, oh, good, somebody's keeping him. Somebody's keeping him, because God knows where you would have spiraled into in this whole epidemic if she weren't around, right?
I have told her that if not for her, if she's like, I think if you're like if there was a bet in Vegas and like I was in line with two other people and the bet was who's most likely to get sucked in to an apocalyptic cult, I'm going to be the first person that people bet on, and they're right. So it's nice to have a rational person in your life, because I honestly, half of me thought we were going to get hit by an asteroid on Wednesday. I'm not even joking. It's embarrassing. I really thought that, and my wife has been making fun of me all the way through, like good. Every single time. Yeah, and look what happened. We didn't get hit by an asteroid, so
healthy. We got a bunch more questions for you, if you don't mind. Taylor, go ahead. Taylor.
Hey, Dr. Drew. Also, Duncan Trussell. I'm a big fan of both of you guys.
Thanks, buddy.
I first found out about Duncan Trussell. He was on This Is Not Happening on Comedy Central, him dying on acid. That was that was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen on Comedy Central. And
thank you.
My question is, what was the inspiration behind the universe in your show, Midnight Gospel, and what inspired the designs behind the characters in the show?
And the giant vulva that you stick your head into. I wondered about that too.
Is that what that was?
Isn't that what that is?
I didn't see it. Drew saw that.
Isn't that what that is?
I don't see it. You think that looks like a vulva? What? We didn't intend that at all.
It's either that or an asshole. I figured vulva looked a little more appealing.
You sound like me when I'm drunk. Hey. Anyway, to answer the question, I would have to speak for 120 artists on the show. It was a real collaboration, meaning that it was a group mind, and I think some archetypes naturally appeared. To answer the multiverse simulator question, which does look like a vulva. And I can only speak from my opinion. I'm not speaking for Pendleton or Jesse Moynihan or Mike Mayfield or any of the other brilliant animators and artists on the show. But, if you want to conceptualize something that a universe would exist within, what better image than a vulva, the womb? What better image than, because obviously, no spoiler here. I don't know if you know this. I imagine you do, but when you come inside of a vulva, it makes a baby, and that's an amazing thing. Yeah, Dr. Drew, you didn't know this?
Oh my God!
Oh my God!
It's so crazy!
Oh my God! I know it's fucked up. It's so crazy. I just found out a couple of days ago, but it's weird because I have a son. But so what is the universe held within? You have to, if you're creating a multiverse simulator, I think originally my idea was just some kind of computer or something. And I think maybe it was, I don't want to say it was Penn's idea, but maybe I think he had this understanding of like with a goddess. And I don't know, again, he never said he never said those terms. So I hesitate to talk about it too much, because also I don't want to rob people of their own interpretation. But a lot of the universe was Jesse Moynihan. You can check out his incredible graphic comics forming. They're amazing.
And I'm just thinking about what happens to Clancy when he puts his head in the vulva. He goes into a womb and is transported to other places, right? Isn't that his transport vehicle is a womb, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. He goes into the fetal position as he's rocketing through the multiverse.
Of course, as is the custom.
Yes.
And I'm blanking on the who is the voice of the computer?
Oh, that's Phil Hendry.
Phil Hendry. With that, I just thought that's such a brilliant choice. I mean,
he's so good.
Oh my God. Let's see, Uncle Jimmy. Uncle Jimmy.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
We're good. What's up?
Hey, are you there? Can you hear? Not much, but I love you, Drew. Duncan, I've got a movie to pitch to you, and if you run with this idea, I want $10. Okay.
Okay. You got it. Let's hear it.
You ready? So
yeah,
it's this all American surfer kind of guy. You know, he hangs out down on the beach. He surfs. He does great things in school. He plays high school ball. Learns to find his inner self and his true strengths. Dedicates his life and decades to medicine and helping all kinds of people, and just gives and gives and gives. And then he makes one statement in his life that a couple people don't agree with, and the whole world turns on him and wants to kill him.
Hey, wait a minute.
Is that a good premise for a movie?
It's hey, maybe it's a documentary. How about that? That's what it ought to be. Duncan, what do you say?
I mean, first of all, I mean, this surfer, it's like they'll put. For the script, the thing is like, how does he get that statement out? What does he tweet or something? Is this a famous surfer?
No,
I just don't understand.
You're missing the whole thing. When I was a kid, I was a beach bum. I was a lifeguard and kind of a surfer kid, and dedicated my life to helping people. And because I made a comparison between the flu and the COVID, I was threatened
what?
with. He was talking about me.
Hold on, wait. You made a comparison between the flu and COVID?
I made a comparison.
No. Oh my God, I take back what I said. I take back what I said. What a monster. How dare you say that? Are you kidding me?
I know.
Oh, I don't know. I think well, you know, I know that, sorry if I wrecked your joke, but like, you know, I do think like somebody needs to do a documentary on this, like this swarming thing that's happening, because it's, you know, and I don't know what that looks like, but it sucks when, you know, when it happens to somebody who, you know, personally to be one of the sweetest people you ever met. That really sucks, man, because I also know that even though you're putting on a appearance that you've gotten good at, I know it's probably eating you up a little bit at night.
Oh, it was a little bit. It was listen, my family's safety was in jeopardy. It was very serious.
We felt like we were being stalked.
Oh no, it was horrific, like you can't even imagine horrific. And you can't respond. You're not allowed to respond because that only accelerates it. So you just have to, you can't say anything. You have to just sort of wait for it to pass like some sort of weird storm. Look, humans behave like this every so often. Let me be clear. When narcissism takes off, that's when mob behavior becomes dangerous. It happened in the French Revolution. Just study your pre-revolutionary France. All kinds of childhood trauma. Adults that then started killing people if they weren't perfect, and if you weren't perfect enough, they'd chop your head off too. And so eventually everybody went up on the guillotine, and that's what we have happening now. If no one is perfect enough to witness what's happening to Joe Biden. He's getting sucked into a phenomenon where even he's going to get hurt by no one is perfect enough for the mob, right? And I'm not saying whether Joe Biden did or didn't do anything. I don't have any opinion about that.
God,
I'm just saying
Jesus,
the mob,
you really are self-destructive here. You're going to do a Joe Biden thing on the heels of your flu. Let's just admit, you're done. You just want to retire. Why just retire?
Yeah.
Right. So the point is, they'll pull that piece out, and not the part where I'm saying I'm just using it as an example. I don't have an opinion about it. I'm neutral. And then it becomes I said something bad about Joe Biden. So
I mean, we gotta figure out a way somehow, and I don't understand how to do it because I have my own people that I deeply dislike, and there's shit people do all the time that really bothers me. But I've fallen in with these hippies who over and over again really try to beat into me, not literally, because that would go against what I'm about to say, this idea that we have got to figure out a way to love everybody. And, Ram Dass, who is this, one of the great hippie spiritual leaders of our time, he made a point of putting the president on his puja table where he meditated, a picture of the president. And, it wasn't just, so of course Obama was up there, but also he had a whole joke about how, he had George Bush up there, and hippies were not big fans of George Bush, and he would talk about how on this puja table, which is basically you meditate in front of it, he would have pictures of these saints, his teachers, his friends, his family, and he would look at them and be like, "Oh, Neem Karoli Baba, I love you," or "Oh, Siddhi Ma, I love you," and then he would get to George Bush and be like, "Hi, George," But what he was trying to do was to recognize that every single human has the karmic burden of whatever their particular predicament is. And we have got to figure out a way to simultaneously love someone without excusing shit behavior. And I don't think the way to teach people is by, mass humiliation necessarily. It's like, I don't know what the answer is because I'm just a podcaster, comedian dude. But it is, what is it showing our kids if the answer to dealing with monsters is just to be monstrous towards them?
Right. Again, study revolutionary France. It was just really where we're doing the exact same thing. We're not doing it quite to the extent that they did it, but it's the exact same behavior where we just eat ourselves. Just eating ourselves, what I'm saying. Do you remember that I've told you this once, maybe you may have forgotten, that I was working on a documentary on hallucinogenics with Ram Dass's niece, Sasha Alpert?
Yeah, you told me.
Remember that?
Yeah.
It never
cool.
went anywhere, another thing I wanted to ask you about that I was going to mean to ask you an hour ago, but let me go ahead with it since it's on my mind. The story with your mom was so moving. I've never heard what happened with your dad.
Oh yeah, he passed away. He had COPD, and it killed him, and it happened really fast. But he didn't let me know until the very end that he was dying, because he's the kind of person that just didn't want to. He just wanted it to be between him and the universe, I guess. But I don't think he expected it to happen as fast as it did. I don't think he realized that it would happen. He didn't want to be resuscitated. He was under the care of hospice. We could have, when it was happening, we could have taken him to the hospital and we could have gotten him oxygen but he told us not to do that because it would just be like a temporary respite.
Right. Well, let's have, this is an important, you're a good person to have this conversation with. Susan and I had it a couple of times this week on these streams.
Oh boy. Yeah,
here we go. And this pandemic, it brought it to the fore for me. We don't deal with end of life in this country. We just don't deal with it. The reality is, if I were 85 years old or older, I would never want to be put on a ventilator because it is horrific. The recovery is terrible, and the probability of my living a year after being sick enough to need a ventilator is very low, and a horrible year after that. So for me, no ventilator after age 85 under any circumstance. No one's talking about that with people that are that age, getting their wishes, finding out what they want. Also, I don't know about you, Duncan, I don't ever want to live in a nursing home. If I ever get so debilitated neurologically that I'm so out of it, somebody's got to be feeding me and wiping my ass, or I'm physically so debilitated that I need two people to turn me, forget it. Just
give him the vulva.
Yeah. Forget. Yeah, I'll put my head in the vulva.
He needs an exit strategy.
I'll put my head in the vulva and pick a planet.
I love it. I love that. That's the new term for euthanasia, putting your head in a vulva.
But
yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And my dad felt the exact same way.
Yeah.
And not to bring it back to the Midnight Gospel, but in the episode with Caitlin Doty, who is part of the death positivity movement, this one of the things she teaches is that you need to have this conversation with your parents now, and they might not want to talk about it. They might, it might bother them, but have the conversation before they suddenly decline to the point where they can't talk anymore, because once that happens, you don't know what their last wishes are. Maybe they do want to be resuscitated. Maybe they do.
Yeah, if they do, but if they do, that's our job, is to represent their interest, even though they may not fully understand the decision they're making. That's still that's not our business. But by the same token,
may I just? Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Just to add, if someone is like with COPD, they're going to decline mentally and so quickly that if you haven't already figured out how if they want to go into nursing home, whatever, they might actually say something that you take the wrong way, that they didn't even mean. So that's the other problem. You have to, as awful as it is, this right now is the time to talk to your folks and make sure that all the other stuff, what's their internet passwords, all that stuff, like things you won't be able to do if. Yeah.
That's right.
Sorry,
that was my third favorite episode, by the way. The one where you were talking about the history of embalming, essentially, is where you started.
Yeah. That was crazy. That it was the whole thing is something of a scam. That the dead body is not as like pestilent or whatever as many of us have been taught to believe. In fact, you have less of a chance of catching a cold or whatever from a dead body than a living body. But they had to figure out a way to get convince people to keep embalming people after the Civil War.
Well, I think also people are freaked out around dead bodies. I think all mammals get freaked out around dead things. I just think that's a natural instinct to kind of recoil a little bit. But we gone to great extents in this country, particularly, to hide it all, to pretend it doesn't exist, to sanitize it. And part of the sanitization is the embalming, and so we can set things up for whenever we want to do the funeral. Back in the turn of the century, they used to do it in people's parlors. They'd set people up in their front room, and that would be that.
And that's where the term living room comes from, right? Because it's the room where people would go where there wasn't a dead body. Is that correct?
I don't know that, but it sounds fascinating. Did this woman tell you that, this death positive person?
You know what? She probably did, and I can't remember. I think she might have said that, but then maybe she did. And I do remember hearing that somewhere. Every room in the house should be a damn living room, right? Like, what is
yes,
dying room?
Death room and a living room. Dead room and living. Oh, my God, that's funny. All right, listen, you've been very generous with your time here. I still have calls galore, but I don't think
I have time if you want to go.
Okay. All right, we'll get to a couple more. Here we go. Here is Autumn. Go ahead, Autumn. Autumn?
Hi, guys. First things first, I wanted to say, Dr. Drew, thank you for being your most authentic self. Like, you helped me a lot through my teen depression years when I was, like, stuck at home, no one to even talk to. So your show was just, like, the highlight of everything.
Autumn, to that, hang on a second. Before you ask a question, I want to tell you, I did a podcast yesterday where I had a therapist do therapy on me. I had her do CBT on me. And in that therapy session, authenticity was a big feature of what she was trying to do. And I'm thinking I may subject myself to some more of that, do therapy so people can get a sense of how therapy works, what different kinds of therapies are. Because, I describe them all the time, and I can tell that people just zone out. They don't know what I'm talking about. But if you hear somebody actually engaged in the therapy session, it kind of lets you know exactly what it's all about. So look for that. I'll have that up in a few weeks at the Dr. Drew podcast. But thanks for that, Autumn.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Duncan, congratulations on the show. It was mind-blowing. It was just, amazing. My question, though, is what are your thoughts on spiritual awakening? Because, this whole quarantine, being stuck at home and, excuse me, just kind of having the time to reflect on everything, I found myself coming to this point of spiritual awakening. I wanted to know if you've ever, been through that or are going through that. And then also, what do you think is next to come? And either of you guys could answer as well.
Next to come for the country or for each of us? What do you mean?
Yeah, I guess I kind of mean on like a widespread human level,
what's
for
to
us.
come? Oof. I'm not sure. Yeah. We'll chat about it. The great question. Go ahead, Duncan.
I think spiritual awakening is one of those terms that is very confusing and has a million different definitions. And it's so many people hear that and they literally, their eyes roll back so far in their head that they have strokes. There's people who are so mad at luckily a very small percentage of people have watched the Midnight Gospel. They're just upset because it's spiritual and there's spiritual ideas in there. And I get it, man, because a lot of times we've run into quote spiritual people who end up like giving our girlfriends or wives massages, and then the next thing you know, they're banging them down in some tent in a festival somewhere, and it's too late.
Terrible.
So I get it, but I know, but it does. It's like it happens all the time, all over the world. Some crystal collector, takes your man or woman away from you, and seduces them, makes love for them for a very long time. Now, that being said, there's a beautiful side to it, and I think the term is a really good description of the possibility in anybody's life to stop being a robot, to stop being automatic, and to stop being a slave to your instincts and your habits, or to become what's often called non-reactive, or to make your reactions less instantaneous, to produce what is known as the pause. Sharon Salzberg is a great person to check out. She talks about this, just to create through meditation, through some practice, the ability to create a millisecond pause in between something happening and you reacting to it. And that pause, even, give yourself 30 seconds before you send the angry email, and you might not send it. And then that exploration of how to become less reactive, I think, is something I would call spiritual awakening, because for me, my own reactivity has been annihilatory for me. Like, it has really fucked up my life so many times, because I get angry, I react instantly, I say things I don't mean to people I love, and then it takes a long time to recover from that. And so for me, the spirituality stuff is more than just some kind of fad thing. It's something that I do because if I don't, I'll end up becoming the biggest monster on earth. So anyway, spiritual awakening, my thoughts on it, yes. And as far as what's going to happen to the entire planet after this thing, my hope is, I don't know is my answer, but my hope is people realize they can work from home effectively, and that we restructure the way we've been doing jobs that don't require our meat bodies to be next to each other. Because I think that's the one great thing that could happen for us on a planetary level, is we start doing what we should have done 10 years ago, which is turn telecommuting into something that is a mandatory thing if there's no need for human bodies to be next to each other.
And I'm surprised you didn't mention the singularity.
Oh, don't get me started on the singularity. That's 2045, baby. That's 2045.
All
we
right,
got some time.
That's a date that keeps coming up. I agree with you. Clancy mentions anger too, I think, in the gospel, and I was surprised to hear you. I didn't pick up on that. I think it was even during our podcast, and I'd never really heard you say that before, and you're saying it again now. I don't experience you as an angry person. You sure it's not irritability from the depression?
100% positive. It's terrible. I've had to go to therapy for it. Not to suddenly become incredibly confessional or to try to excuse it, because there's no excuse for it. But, my father had PTSD. He was self-medicating with alcohol and I think I learned how to deal with things was to become angry, or maybe I don't know what. I mean, this is why there's therapy, and I don't have the answer for it yet. And if I did, I don't know that I want to share it necessarily. It is very personal, but yeah, man, it's this is a thing that I struggle with, and without having teachers in my life or having some kind of practice. Also, thank God, having a very forgiving wife who's created a space within which I could become a better person, which is hopefully what a marriage. God, I sound cheesy. Jesus Christ, what am I doing? Oh my God, this isn't therapy. I'm sorry. You make me too comfortable, Dr. Drew.
Rogan brings out the CIA agent. I bring out the cheese.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go. I'm going to start going on a soliloquy about my wife. I do really love her though, and that's to me, I think we all have our stuff to deal with, and you shouldn't be afraid to admit that you have whatever your quirks are. because otherwise people will get the wrong idea, and the next thing you know, you're giving this impression that it's possible to live a human life without having flaws, sometimes horrible flaws.
We all have them. We all have them. Nobody's perfect. It's just the way it is. You got to try to be your best. I think a great way to think about, it's the Kantian moral imperative. Just behave as though somebody's watching you, and you have to be essentially behaving in such a way that your behavior sets a moral tone. Like you're everything you do is beyond reproach, and it's being watched, and you're the one watching it, so you're the one that really knows. But if you want to be a good person,
the CIA.
Yeah, the CIA watched a little bit too, but to this end, what's going to happen next after this pandemic? I am really, really, really concerned about the splitting and the breaking down and causing group, tribe think, and it's been gravely concerning to me for some time. And I don't know how we get out of that. Do you? I mean, the anger and the mobs and the destroying one another and the news and the press that is just so vitriolic and destructive. Do you have any ideas?
This is my favorite Jack Kornfield quote. He says, "Tend to the part of the garden you can touch." And I think that is the answer is there's no way any individual is going to heal the political rifts in between people, the ideological rifts in between people. Nobody can there's no individual that I think is capable of doing that. But I know that interpersonally between my friends and, my family and my kid, I could do what you're talking about, Dr. Drew, which is actively have an intention of improving their lives and of being a better person. And, this is one of the things I love that Ram Dass said, is that the best way to help other people is to work on yourself and to really actively try to improve yourself, not by beating yourself up or not by tormenting yourself or trying to change and destroy who you are, but by learning how to really come to terms with who you are in a healthy way. I think that if we all do that, or even 20 or 30% of us do that, that's going to create, not just in this time period, but in all time periods, a potential of some kind of shift in consciousness that is for the better.
Well, Voltaire at the end of Candide says we should cultivate our gardens. After traveling the world, that was what he decided, that we need to each cultivate our own garden. I think that's the same thing, right? Well, I think that's a good place to stop. We've covered a lot of territory, and I surely hope you do another season of Midnight Gospel, man, because it's so appealing, and it's so it was an absolute sort of therapeutic in the setting of what we're all dealing with right now. It really was a sense of relief, and congratulations on all the success it's having. The people are recognizing it to be as good as what it is. And why they wouldn't do another one with you, I can't imagine, right? Maybe. Hey,
look, we just haven't heard yet. So, it's in the hands of God right now, and that's fine with me. But, fingers crossed.
And last time I saw you was me and Pete Holmes went to dinner. So why don't we go do that again when this all lifts? There'll be something for me to look forward to.
I would love that.
Right,
absolutely. Let's really do it. Not Hollywood do it, which means you don't do it. But that's my fault. I flaked on you. I'm sorry. I want to do it. I miss you.
No, we did it. We just have to do it again. We have to do it again. And
that's
look forward to when we get through all this. And stay safe. Say hi to your wife. Kiss your son. And I miss you. And thank you for being here today and for giving us the Midnight Gospel. It's a good thing.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Drew. I love you. I love you, Susan. See you around. Bye.
See you soon, guys. And we will wrap it up at this point. If you want, I can give you a couple minutes on the COVID thing, just to give us a little bit of a update. In California, we are doing really, really, really well. I do not understand why our governor is so upset with the opening of the beaches. They are planning to switch to distancing and masks in a week or two. Why they have to wait till the last second to do that, I don't quite understand, but maybe they'll give us some explanation for that. New York is doing a lot better. As I've told people, I applied to be part of their health response team. They are really way down on hospitalizations, so they don't need to bring in people like me. The death rate per day has fallen from a high of about 1,100 It's now at about 200 and falling rapidly. So that's a good thing. If you look at Georgia and Tennessee, and let's look at some updated data on that, and Texas, things are slowing there. Georgia particularly is our canary in the coal mine. Again, they chose the exact wrong moment to open things up, and yet in spite of that, when you look at the historical data, they are at about, there's a little uptick today in new tests, and but no increase in positives. So maybe a little increase in positive tests, but no increase in hospitalization, no significant increase in that. So let's watch that. They should be going down. Well, no, they were really right at about the plateau stage. So this is about where they should be, whether they were quarantined or not. And again, a reminder that we just don't know whether quarantine and distancing is different. We don't know. There's no science on that. There's speculation, there's computer modeling, but there's no actual evidence on that. So this would be the state that will tell us that. Let me just quickly look at, for instance, Texas, if I can come up with that. 1 second here. Was I looking at Georgia? Wait, maybe I wasn't even looking at Georgia. Yes, I was looking at Georgia. And Texas, here is 1 second. Texas, I don't know how many days they're into this there at Texas, but let's see if I can come up. My goodness, I have to scroll down quite a ways, I'm afraid. 1 second. Tennessee, I got to Tennessee first. Let's look at the Tennessee historical data, which is also a state that seems to be opening up. They're at such a low level anyway, I'm not so sure we're going to get something meaningful out of that. They're about the same, maybe a little uptick in positive tests, for Tennessee. So that's interesting. That may not be good news for them. Let me see in the COVID-19. That's interesting that Tennessee, hold on. Tennessee, yeah, they're kind of all over the place. They've been sort of low. They're only at about 5 deaths per day, even though I know that's a horrible number. And they've been so low in their hospitalizations, it's hard to know what to make of that.
Did you mention Georgia?
I did discuss Georgia, yeah.
Okay. I'm doing something else, sorry.
Let me go back to Tennessee. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to make of this. It looks like there's a little uptick in, there was an uptick on Tuesday in hospitalizations, Tuesday to Wednesday. Yeah, not really. Yeah, it's really about the same. And then finally, let me go to Texas, if I might. It's hard to make much of this data the way it is. I got to say, it's still lagging. But I think we'll be able to see if there's any significant changes. That's for sure. For some reason, Thursday data was kind of peculiar, and Thursday and Friday were added together. Again, the hospitalization data is not there for Texas, so I can't really say anything. All right, so we'll keep watching it. Again, that will be some evidence to help us differentiate whether or not distancing, masks, and hand washing is different than quarantining. Thus far, it's speculated that it is, but we really don't know. Yes, we thank Duncan for a great show. I'm looking at your restream comments here.
He's so fun to listen to.
He's great, right? He's so entertaining to listen to. He's always got something really interesting to say. Oh, good. Amy, you're a Duncan fan now. You should be. Check out the Midnight Gospel. You will be happy you did. That's what his mind looks like. If you want to see what it looks like. And what he did was took a bunch of interesting podcasts he did. I was lucky enough to have been one of them, and turned them into a cartoon adventure. Okay, I think that's about that. Do we need to
plug away, baby doll?
Do we need to hear from anybody? I want to remind everybody that our friends at Needle Destruction Device, I'm very, very pleased to be a part of these devices, which I can't quite reach right now. But you just put the needle in. You've seen my ads do it.
We'll play the ad right after.
All right, we'll play the ad. Don't worry.
And then also mention drdrew.com.
There's a promo code for $70 off at Dr. Drew 2020 if you use that promo code. drdrew.com. You can check out these streams. We will be away the weekend, right, Susan? Hopefully back on Monday. Yes, we'll be back on Monday, but away the weekend. There will be Well, which is it going to be? Let's decide
I don't know. It
now.
depends on, Caleb might be able to run a dose.
I can do it.
Monday. All right. So I'm planning Monday, and then we'll do a stream on Tuesday also. There will be new data by Monday, I'm sure of it. And so I want to review that for you guys and see what we can make of all that. Also, our friends at Blue Mike, thank you for providing this equipment for us. Anybody else we should be talking about, Susan? Okay, go to
Just all the great shows.
Go to
Dr. Drew After Dark,
Yep.
and Adam and Drew Show, and the Dr. Drew podcast. You have great guests on there.
Yeah, the Dr. Drew podcast, it's going to be, the next few weeks are very interesting. I suggest you check it out. I've got some really good experts in there, and I do have somebody do therapy on me, and we get kind of some interesting stuff. And I thought it was I don't know. I like the direction it's going. And if you have any suggestions, please send to drdrew.com/contact, and we'll be happy to take that. And of course, After Dark, me and Christina P. I did a crazy one with Josh Potter. You need to watch. Josh is a sex worker now, and we talk a little bit about that. Who gasped? Oh, joy. All right, you guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you for the Midnight Gospel, and we'll see you on Monday. Needles have increasingly become a part of everyday life. Proper disposal is both difficult and expensive. We have the solution. Simpler, safer, affordable, and fulfills the obligation to protect our environment. A single stick with something like this means tracking down the user. It means blood test for the person's stock. It means possibly medication for an extended period of time. Needle sticks are devastating. No more. Incinerate the needle. Needle goes in this port. It's over. Done. Needle gone. We all have loved ones who use needles. Keep their home safe. Medical offices are loaded with sharps. We are using ancient technology to protect our patients, our staff, ourselves. You know what needle sticks do. You know the cost and the devastation psychologically and physically, potentially, from a needle stick. Eliminate that completely. Stop using ancient technology. Sand MIDI. It will solve your problems. Find out more at needledestructiondevice.com.